I'm Tom Moore, and we are recapping Week 6 in the NFL.
I'm Sean McGlone, and we are going to tell you the major injuries that occurred this week.
I'm Matt Manor, and we'll tell you who scored the most fantasy points this past week.
I'm Finnegan Corcoran-Doolin, and we have our second special guest.
Hello and welcome to BMB Primetime Fantasy Report for Week 6 in the NFL. Starting off our game of the week is Monday's showdown between the reigning champions and the Buffalo Bills. Two amazing quarterbacks with rocket arms showing what they could do, and that's exactly what they did. The Chiefs did, however, come on top with a score of 26-17. Our player of the game goes to tight end Travis Kelce, who received 2 touchdowns in Monday's win. Another player that deserves an amazing amount of recognition is rookie running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who had 26 carries and ran for 161 yards. Of course, you can't go without a Chiefs game without mentioning Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes passed for 225 yards and threw 2 touchdowns. Mahomes also set the franchise record for the Chiefs with 16 consecutive games with a passing touchdown. The Chiefs bounced back from a week's loss and look like they never missed a beat.
This week saw the Tennessee Titans holding on to their undefeated season by defeating the Houston Texans. The major taking point in this game was our player of the week, Derrick Henry, who ran for 212 rushing yards and ran for 2 touchdowns. Henry also had that outstanding 94-yard run. Another key to the Titans' victory was quarterback Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill threw for 364 yards and threw 4 touchdown passes. The Titans still remain undefeated this season.
Tannehill had a phenomenal game. But you want to know who else did? Lamar Jackson. He threw for 136 yards and 1 passing touchdown. But the real star of the show was defensive end Calais Campbell. Campbell took down Carson Wentz on 3 occasions. The Ravens now improved to 5-1.
The Ravens may have extended their record, but a team that was lucky to get a win was the Falcons, who snapped their losing streak and finally got their first win of the season over the Minnesota Vikings. Matt Ryan was proving why the Falcons' season still has hope. Ryan passed for 371 passing yards and threw for 4 receiving touchdowns, 2 of which went to Julio Jones, who faked an injury, giving all Falcons fans a heart attack. Not cool, Julio. 2020 has been rough enough.
A team that hasn't had a rough 2020 has been the unstoppable Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers destroyed the Browns by a score of 38-7. The real star of the game was the Steelers' defense, who have shown why they could be the best defense in the league.
This week also saw the Colts defeat the Bengals 31-27. The start of the game goes out to veteran quarterback Phillip Rivers. I think leaving the Chargers and heading to Indianapolis was the best decision for both teams. Rivers threw for 371 yards and 3 touchdown passes. The Colts' record is now standing at 4-2.
The Bengals are definitely not the only team struggling this season. The Jaguars took another loss against the 2-3 Detroit Lions. Both teams have not had the best of recent seasons. Player of the game goes to DeAndre Swift, who scored 2 rushing touchdowns to help his team secure the victory.
This week, the Chicago Bears gave our producer another heart attack late in the 4th quarter. The Chicago Bears did pull through and got the win over the Carolina Panthers. The Bears' defense has been the real reason that the Bears are 5-1. Player goes to DeAndre Houston Carson, who picked off the last throw of the game, securing the Bears' win.
The bigger news, the New York Giants got their first win of the season when they defeated conference rivals, the Washington football team. Joining us now to dissect is BMB Morning Announcements anchor AJ Freed. Thanks for joining us, AJ.
My pleasure, Tom.
So, to get things started off, obviously you're a New York Giants fan, but, what made you become a New York Giants fan?
Growing up, my dad was a big Giants fan and a Steelers fan, but I never really cared for the Steelers because when you're 4, blue is a better color than yellow. And I just kind of stuck with it all these years. My dad still roots for the Steelers and the Giants, but I'm, always going to represent the Giants as a New Yorker. Ups and down years, it's got to support the team no matter what. That's what it's like being a New York fan.
Right. So, since their last Super Bowl in 2012, things have been very rocky for Big Blue. They only made the playoffs once since then. What are your thoughts on this?
So when did they make the playoffs? Do you remember?
Uh,
Like 2014, I believe,
yeah, I
right?
think you're correct.
So it's been about a 6-year tank season.
Yeah.
I like what we've gotten in the past. I like, our draft picks. Of course, Saquon, which is, really unfortunate what's going on with him now. Can't go wrong with Daniel Jones and all their other great pickups of the past. But, I still like to think on the bright side of things. Not every year is going to be what I want it to be, but you just got to stick with it. Eventually we're going to get back into that stage. We're going to have a, solid team. We're going to work back into it. And it's all going to get back to where it was when we were, making the Super Bowl.
Now I think I can speak for all Giants fans out here. When you saw the Saquon Barkley where he tore his ACL, that nasty fall in week 2, what was going through your mind as a Giants fan?
Just pain. I was really optimistic for when I watched the first game of the season against the Steelers. We put up a pretty decent fight in the first half, but of course Saquon didn't have a great game. So I figured, the second game he'd, get his thing back together, he'd roll back into it. But then just to see it, and then, everywhere, all online, social media, all you're seeing is Saquon, torn ACL, I believe it was, out for the season. It just hurts. As a Giants fan, you hate to see stuff like that, especially your top player. It's just horrible. I couldn't watch.
Yeah, it's a tough scenario there, But AJ, there have been a lot of debates over the season about starting quarterback Daniel Jones. Do you believe with the good offensive line helping Jones along the way, could Jones become a big Blues franchise quarterback similar to Eli Manning?
I personally love Daniel Jones, right? I have people I know that hate Daniel Jones. I think if we can get a stronger offensive lineman to protect him better, and not force him to always have to, rush it and everything, I think we can really turn Daniel Jones into what Eli Manning was for the Giants franchise. I'd like to believe he could become a franchise player. I hope he doesn't, figure out he has a little bit of talent and leave us like most players do. Not saying anything about Odell, but, that's always, I like Daniel Jones. I like the way he plays. I always liked him his rookie season when, there was Eli Manning who was too afraid to get hit. And then there was Daniel Jones came in around, I think, the 4th game of the season and was just getting beat up, and he was taking it and he was getting right back up. And I love to see that as a Giants fan and as a football fan in general.
Cool. Now, the Giants play tomorrow night on Thursday Night Primetime Football against the Philadelphia Eagles. How are you feeling going into this game as a Giants fan?
Look, like I said, we need an offensive line. So we need our offensive line to, get stronger, or else we're just going to get destroyed every game. I like, I can't remember we got him from the Green Bay Packers. He's been killing it.
Blake Martinez, the middle linebacker.
Insane. Yeah, he's insane.
He was a great piece in Green Bay. I remember.
Yeah, he was a great pickup for us. I just felt if we had a healthier team, everyone back. I felt we could have had a better chance against teams like that. Ingram's a star player in my opinion. Golden Tate, star player. If Saquon was healthy. Didn't Pepper? I'm pretty sure Peppers also got injured last game.
Yeah, I believe he did.
Yeah. So if we just had a healthy team, good offensive line, we could have been something special this season.
Absolutely. Well, I wish the best of luck to the Giants on Thursday Night Primetime Football. Thank you for joining us, AJ, on the show, and I can't wait to see you on the morning announcements on Friday morning. Now back to you, Menno.
Thanks, Tom. For the last 2 episodes, I've been saying how confident I was in my New England Patriots to defeat the Denver Broncos. I'm not shocked at all to report that I was horribly wrong. This week, I had to watch the Denver Broncos defeat my New England Patriots 12-18. Our biggest problem was that, without a doubt, our offensive line. They couldn't hold the block. We were battered by injuries. But whenever they did block, either Cam Newton missed the throw or the receivers dropped the ball. I'm not going to go on for an hour. We got outplayed by a kicker. They weren't even able to score a touchdown. We only practiced once in 2 weeks, so a part of me expected this. But now we have to pull off a huge upset to even go 9-7.
Oh, you think you're sad about the Patriots losing, Mano? At least the Patriots put 12 points on the board. Last week, I said I'll tell you how bad the Jets lose, and wow, shockingly, I'm right. The Jets lost to the Miami Dolphins 24-0. And now, the Jets are the only winless team in the NFL. Fantastic. The next 3 games are going to be awful as well. The Bills, Chiefs, and Patriots. My God, please don't go 0-16.
A game that should have been close, which was not, was Sunday's game against the Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs outplayed the Packers, which led to a blowout and a score of 38-10 to the Buccaneers. Brady passed for 166 yards and threw for 2 touchdowns, but the star was running back Ronald Jones, who ran for 113 yards and helped the Bucs out with 2 rushing touchdowns.
Sunday Night Football is always a must-see, and this week was no different. This Sunday saw the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo especially bounce back from last week's loss. Even with the great defense from the LA Rams, the Niners were still able to fight their way to victory.
The final game we will be talking about is Monday's second game, where the Arizona Cardinals defeated the Dallas Cowboys. After last week's horrific injury involving Dak Prescott, the Cowboys managed to win that game. Side note, Prescott is still the NFL's leading passer with 1,856 passing yards. This week, however, was another tough loss. The NFC East is certainly struggling. Their record is 5 wins, 18 losses, and 1 tie. The NFC East has had quite the difficult season.
Switching gears, we have to inform you on this week's biggest injuries. Cleveland Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield injured his ribs this past week and was replaced by Case Keenum. Mayfield was pulled in the third quarter after it was clear that Mayfield was holding his ribs. He is questionable for next week's game against the Bengals.
From the AFC's Baltimore Ravens, running back Mark Ingram, who still has a chance to play in Week 8 against the Steelers, Ingram injured his ankle in the first quarter of Sunday's game.
That's all for this week's injury report. Now let's see which scored your fantasy team the most fantasy points.
Coming in number 5 is Atlanta Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan. Ryan put up 31.64 fantasy points this week. Not only did Ryan get his first win of the season, he threw 4 passing touchdowns and threw for over 371 yards.
Number 4 would be Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson, who threw for 335 yards and 4 touchdowns, which totaled to 32 fantasy points. Things may not be looking up for the Houston Texans, but they sure are looking up for Deshaun Watson.
Sliding in at number 3 is Julio Jones, who had 33.7 fantasy points. Jones had 8 receptions for 137 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns.
Our runner-up is Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings, who put up 39.6 points, racked up 166 yards receiving, and 2 receiving touchdowns in Sunday's loss against the Atlanta Falcons.
Coming in at number 1 was Derrick Henry, who totaled 40.4 fantasy points this week, including a 94-yard rushing touchdown. That translates to 15.4 points for your team. King Henry ran for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's a force to be reckoned with, and we are all still wondering who in this league can stop Derrick Henry.
And now that we've gone over who carried your teams, let's go over who's carried ours. I'll start. This past week, I picked up the win against Sean, 114-83. The leader for the Ottawa Firebirds was Julio Jones, who amassed 33.7 points. Not far behind him was Kyler Murray, who picked up 29 points in his win against the Dallas Cowboys. Only 2 other players for my team hit double digits, those being CeeDee Lamb with 13 and James White for 15. But the big performances from Julio and Kyler was enough to pick up the win.
This week in my fantasy, I got the win, 107-105, only by 2 points, but I got the win. Gardner Minshew was one of my top fantasy players. He got 18 fantasy points this week. He did really well. Another player who did really well for me was Travis Fulgham. He got 19.5 points on fantasy. He did really well. Another player who did very well was Christian Kirk. He got 22 fantasy points. And my top fantasy player this week was Lamar Jackson. He got 28 fantasy points. He threw, of course, for 186 yards. He did amazing, I felt. And, it was a good week in fantasy for me. And I thought I did well. So, yeah.
Well, Finn, your game was a nail-biter. My game was a blowout. I took the win 110-83, improving my record to 4-2. My top 4 players were one of the 5 players that we mentioned early in the show, Deshaun Watson, threw for 335 yards and 4 touchdowns. Ronald Jones, 113 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Cole Beasley, 4 receptions, 45 yards, and a touchdown, as well as, yes, I'm going to say it, the Dolphins defense. Let 0 points allowed to the Jets defense and a pick. Can't go wrong with that.
I think I've started to say the word lost a little bit too much on the show now, as I lost to Mano at a score of 83-114. My top 4 players of the week were Kirk Cousins, David Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Adrian Peterson. It did sting, however, having Matt Ryan, AJ Green, and Rob Gronkowski on my bench. Those 3 players alone, if they did go into my lineup, I would have had the win this week.
Thank you for watching this week's BMB Primetime Fantasy Reports. I've been Matt Maddow, and I will not be making any more predictions regarding my Patriots.
I've been Finnegan Corcoran, and I'm feeling good that the Giants can beat the Eagles.
I've been Sean McClellan, and I'll tell you next week how badly the Jets suffer against the Buffalo Bills.
I've been Tom Morrow, and we'll see you next week for BMB Primetime Fantasy Report for Week 7.